Welcome to my channel. I am the out-of-body atheist, and today I am mostly off script because we're going to be talking about personal experiences. And I don't have to fact check those, so we're golden. So I do have a piece of paper here. Here's everything that's written on it. It's just to keep my thoughts straight because I've had COVID several times now, and every single time I get it, it's like an immersion blender going into my brain. So, yeah. So the thesis of this video, and I'm just going to read this out because I think it's all right. Some believers claim that their personal spiritual experiences are proof for their God. They claim that if atheists were to have similar experiences, that would be enough for them and they would also believe. The reason we don't have sufficient spiritual experiences is because we are not open to them because we have rejected God. So that's the thesis for this video. Because I actually hear it a lot. If you would just have the experience, you would believe. So I want to start by saying that you don't become an atheist by rejecting God. You become an atheist by concluding that you have insufficient reason to believe in a God. It's possible to be an atheist and to be completely open to the possibility of a God. You just don't entertain that possibility because the evidence has never appeared ever in the history of the world. I also want to address the fact that I have had a deeply spiritual experience. I don't talk about it very much. I'm not ashamed of it because obviously I'm about to make a video about it. But I might even have some close friends that I've never shared this with. Hey, close friends, hope you're watching my video. If not, how close are you? Jeez, help me out, support a friend, losers. So I gotta set the stage because these stage settings will actually become relevant later in the conversation. I was working graveyards at a convenience store. The convenience store at the time, was it still Circle K? I don't remember if the store I was at was still a Circle K when it happened. Because when you're working graveyards, you're not getting sufficient or the right schedule of sleep to have a happy, healthy, functional brain. And I'd already been working graveyards for at least a couple of years by the time I had my experience. My memories of that whole time period are kind of scrambled in terms of their sequence. I do know that I had been reading a translation of, was it the Tao Te Ching? Yeah, it was the Tao Te Ching. It was an old Chinese spiritualism / philosophy book in translation. And I was kind of leaning towards Taoism. That's a whole separate video. We'll talk about my journey from being an LDS child at the age of 8 through a whole succession of things to being an atheist. Because it was quite a journey. But anyway, I was well past the believing in a monotheist God, and I was pretty much done believing in any gods at all, but I was still doing some spiritual practices. During my graveyard shifts, there was a period of time between about 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock in the morning where I would very reliably not see anyone ever at all. It was just so dead. And I would beg my store manager, can we please close the store for just a couple hours during that time period? And I'm even willing to stay here for free once I've got everything cleaned up, and I'll just take a nap in the back or something. I don't even freaking care. Can we just, this is killing me. And of course the store manager said, the corporate office does not care if it is killing you. We're not doing things for you. The corporate office has determined that we must stay open all night long, every night, no matter what. So thanks, corporate. I love corporations. I love them so much. I swear this is all relevant. During that period of time, I began doing a meditation practice, and it helped me stay awake and alert better than the coffee did. I drink a lot of coffee. I was also smoking a lot of cigarettes at the time. I was a smoker, on and off, since forever. So my meditation practice was, I would go out and I'd have my cigarette, because of course I would. Smokers incorporate cigarettes in everything. It's part of why they're so addictive. And then I would breathe mindfully. And I have to say, it's much easier to be mindful of your breathing when your lungs are all screwed up. Well, that was a needlessly loud car. If you're one of those jackasses who thinks that it's cool to drive an excessively loud car, you're the only one who thinks that about your car. The rest of us just wish your car would finish dying, because it sounds like it's dying the whole time you're driving it. It doesn't sound like a powerful car. That extra noise doesn't make it sound powerful. That extra noise makes it sound like your car is struggling to accelerate. Your car sounds weak, and it makes you look weak. You self-obsessed, attention-hungry, said the YouTuber, pieces of crap. Anyway, I would focus on my breathing, and being a smoker made it easy because I could feel every inch of it in my sad, sad lungs. After doing that for about 10 minutes or so, as I breathed, I would picture the sensation. So I'd imagine the sensation of energy coming up into my body through the centers of my feet. And I would make myself feel that sensation of the energy moving up through my legs and then up through my torso, just very gradually. And as I imagined that energy moving up through me, I would relax my muscles as much as you can while you're standing up. And I would imagine that energy moving down through my arms and a little bit of it leaking out my fingertips. And as it did that, it would work up through my head and it would just shoot out the top of my head into space. And as I was doing that, I was relaxing my muscles and just being mindful of relaxing every part of my body. And at the time, I didn't believe this was real energy I was moving around. I was already skeptical about that. But it was a really nice meditative practice, and I would do it for about a half hour, and I would wind up feeling quiet and energized at the same time. And it helped me get through my graveyard shifts. So I was in that habit. I was also in a sleep deprivation habit because my son at the time was about 1.5 years old. And on the weekends, I would have my son. So I'd have to switch immediately from a graveyard schedule to a daytime schedule every week. And then at the end of the weekend with my son, I'd have to switch again from a daytime schedule back to a graveyard schedule. So my circadian rhythms were non-existent. None of my sleep ever was good sleep or productive sleep. Plus, at the time I lived in an apartment, and my immediately upstairs neighbor had a toddler. And if you've ever listened to a toddler run across a floor, you understand that somehow a toddler is the heaviest possible manifestation of a human being when they run. I don't understand the physics behind that, but it is clearly true. So one night I went out and I did my little meditation. I smoked my cigarette. I focused on my breathing. And when it came time to start picturing the energy moving up through my feet and my body, it was always kind of a very slow, very intentional, very mindful process. It took a lot to actually feel it. But this night, it didn't take any effort at all. Instead of feeling like I was pulling it through, I felt like I was opening a faucet and it was pouring. And it rushed through my legs, and it rushed through my torso, and it rushed down my arms and out my hands, and it rushed out the top of my head. And it was accompanied with this indescribable feeling So I'm not going to try to describe it. It was amazing. And I had this intense feeling of peace and an intense feeling of connection to everything. And I felt like the whole of my life was encompassed in that moment, and I could see it all, and it was all good, and it was all going to be good. That's a squirrel. There was still the pain, and the pain was good, and I had the very best sober high of my entire freaking life. There is nothing I have done before or since that gave me that endorphin rush. And in the midst of this experience, I actually had a thought that was it was very meta. I thought, oh shit, I could easily waste the rest of my life trying to feel this again, because I know that this is going to end. And as soon as I realized it was going to end, I started to lose it, because I was feeling so bad. It was like going into withdrawals in advance. And eventually I managed to recapture it a little bit by just kind of coming to terms with the fact that it would end, and that's okay too. I think I was there for like almost an hour, just in this place of ecstasy and wonder and awesomeness. And I'm happy to report that I haven't wasted the rest of my life trying to experience it again. As the feeling eventually left me, I was able to let go of it and just be happy about that as well. Be grateful that I experienced it, finally. Because when I was into spiritualism, and before that, when I was into religion, I was always intensely jealous of the people who did have these intensely meaningful religious or spiritual experiences. And I always felt really left out. I ask a couple questions on here as well. It's to keep me prompted and keep me focused. So the first question I asked myself is, why are there spiritual experiences for other gods? And I think that's a really important and thorny question. And we're going to get back into anecdote land. I fell in love with a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And because I was intensely paranoid about she's going to leave me because I am not also LDS. And if you're in the LDS faith, I mean, you can't be with someone who's not LDS, because that screws up your entire afterlife. And so I decided to try very hard to become LDS, because it was more important to me that I stay with her than whatever I believed. I was like, okay, this is it. I want to be with this person, and that's more important than being an atheist to me. So I tried to believe in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I ended up hurting a lot of missionaries' feelings. Guys, if you're watching this, I'm sorry about that, because I would get so frustrated, because the things that they were telling me that they thought would help me on my way to faith were so obviously bullshit. It was like, this isn't helpful. And one of the things that they told me is that if you pray sincerely to God, you will have an experience of communion with that God, and that will be the evidence that you need to bring you to faith, and then you will believe. And I was like, guys, this can't work for me, because I have prayed to multiple gods in my history, and I've always felt that they answered me. Your God answering me, I mean, it's not going to mean anything more than when that one time that I made up a god, the nameless God who protects all the little fuzzy creatures who hide under leaves in the morning when there is still dew on the ground. And as I look around right now, I'm wondering, what would that nameless God do because the temperature is consistently below dew point this time of year. I guess those little fuzzy creatures are just screwed right now. I prayed to that God, and I felt a sense of communion with it. I prayed to so many versions of a Christian God, and every time I felt like I had an answer. But I also prayed to other gods in other faiths and felt responses and connection. And it didn't matter. Either the act of praying sincerely in and of itself is enough without a God, or God is a slut. I mean, that's it. Is your God promiscuous, which would be a direct argument against a Christian God who is jealous, or does your God not exist? Because it seems like just praying to anyone or anything for any reason works. Why are the antecedents for spiritual experiences so similar between cultures? And isn't it suspicious that spiritual practices tend to be practices that drive our brains out of homeostasis? And now I'm done with this paper. So spiritual practices tend to have a couple of things in common. Okay, you have repetition and you have a deficit of something, either a deficit of sleep or a deficit of food through fasting, or a deficit of sensory stimuli through meditation. You're either depriving yourself of something or you're repeating something, and oftentimes you're doing both. And looking back at my own spiritual experience, it happened when I was severely sleep deprived and when I was doing a repetitive practice. And what deprivation and repetition have in common is that they will throw your brain out of homeostasis. When your brain is out of homeostasis, you will have wacky experiences. Like, for instance, one time when I was young and stupid, I went fully without sleep for 72 hours, and I began hallucinating really hard. And because I didn't have any spiritual expectations around my hallucinations, they were just hallucinations. But what do you want to bet? That if I had a spiritual practice associated with that sleep deprivation, or a religious practice, what do you want to bet that my hallucinations would have been, at least to some extent, about that? And I think it's also really significant that spiritual experiences have so much in common, regardless of the religious faith or the meditation practice or the tradition that you're coming at them from. There always seems to be a sense of connectedness or distance, or sometimes both at once, because they don't have to make sense. There always seems to be a calmness and an energizing at the same time thing. There always seems to be a dichotomy that happens. A very high and a very low, a very black and a very white. The edges of things are simultaneously blurry and enhanced. It always seems to be like that. When your brain is kind of short-circuiting a little bit, that does it too. I think that the reason I'm able to have had an intensely personally meaningful spiritual experience and still be an atheist, still find that that experience was insufficient to lead me to believe in a God, is ultimately because I am aware that that thing that happened to me, as much as I enjoyed it and as much as it will always mean a great deal to me, that thing that happened to me is a thing that brains do. When a brain is deprived, it acts outside its typical parameters, and sometimes it gets you high. Sometimes people spend the rest of their lives trying to replicate that high. Or sometimes people will attribute things to that high that really aren't justified. And unfortunately, sometimes people will wind up giving far too much control over their lives or control over their wealth to bad actors because of those feelings they had. Because that bad actor will tell them that they can give them the experience again. And it's the most important thing that ever happened to them in their life. And every single thing about that is a lie. I don't care how amazing that spiritual experience was. It's not the most important thing that happened to you in your life. That's everything else. I think the beauty and the wonder that we experience when our brains are working right is a hell of a lot more important than the beauty and wonder that we experience when our brains are freaking the hell out. I think that it's really important that we do not give control of our lives to charlatans who make empty promises. I think that these people are the opposite of deserving of power. These people are the opposite of trustworthy, and it pisses me off every single day that these people whose only qualification is that they lie really well, and if they're honest, it's just because they're lying to themselves too, are given so much power over individual lives. And it's just painful to watch people give up so much of their own agency to these con men. So anyway, that's my whole personal story. Feel free to tell me in the comments why my spiritual experience just wasn't doing it right and why yours was better, because that's gonna happen. Thank you so much. If you're still watching at the end, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Let's make this channel monetized so that I too can be a person talking about spiritual shit to make money. I'll see you next time. I enjoy arguing with strangers on the internet, and you are welcome to respond to this video in a video of your own. Please either email me or leave me a comment indicating that you have responded to my video. Include a link to your response video. By responding to this or any other video, you grant me permission to respond to your response video. Here are a couple of other videos I've made. Click on one to continue wasting time on YouTube, but don't forget to like this video first.